Hey guys, Matt here. Before we begin this episode of Tower Junkies, I just want to mention that we are currently running a contest where you can win a free Tower Junkies t-shirt. The contest runs from now until January 1st, 2018, and if you want to enter, all you have to do is leave a rating and a review of the podcast on iTunes or Stitcher, take a screenshot of the review and email it to matt@obsessiveviewer.com with the subject line Tower Junkies t-shirt contest. On January 1st, I'll randomly select a winner from the entries and we'll get a free t-shirt mailed to them. We'll be accepting entries until December 31st at midnight, so make sure you get the email in before then. Thank you guys for listening and enjoy this week's episode of Tower Junkies.
You're clean, aren't you? Except for your tower. You're a tower junkie, Roland.
Hello and welcome to Tower Junkies, presented by ObsessiveViewer.com. Tower Junkies is a podcast devoted to Stephen King and his magnum opus, The Dark Tower series. In the show, we discuss the themes, characters, and mythology of the series in Palaver episodes, and we review the books and comic series in Kef episodes. We also discuss King novels related to the Dark Tower series, non-Tower King novels, TV and film adaptations of King's work, and the latest news about potential Dark Tower-related adaptations. You can find more of our work at TowerJunkiesPod.com and follow us on every level of social media at TowerJunkiesPod. And for this episode, it's just me, Matt Hurt, your host for the week. Today, I'm going to be talking about my thoughts on Stephen King's novel Christine. I don't remember why I picked it up to read it, but I just kind of on a whim. I have a bunch of Stephen King paperbacks and a bunch of I have a big collection of Stephen King books that I want to read all of them. It's my goal is to read everything that he's written. So I picked up Christine and read that. This was a couple months ago, and now I'm here to review it. And then here in the coming episodes, we're going to be reviewing Christine, the movie. Me and Tiny and I are going to be reviewing it. So, before I get into my actual review of Christine, a couple things right off the top to talk about. One is our friends over at Castle Rock TV podcast. They're calling it a day, unfortunately. They're closing down their podcast after 13 episodes, and we're sad to see them go, but man, they had a great run. In 13 episodes, they're just really they're really good podcasters. Like they have such a great chemistry over there, Skip and Christopher. And yeah, so it's sad to see them go, but I recommend checking out what they have of Castle Rock TV podcast, and then also check out 11/22/63, an event podcast, for all their work. And then the other thing that I wanted to bring up is just real briefly, I went and saw Justice League of last week. You'll hear a review. If you listen to the Obsessive Viewer, you'll hear me review it with our friend Fecus. And the movie was just okay. You'll hear my review if you listen to the episode, but I did really appreciate the Pet Sematary reference that was made in the movie. I got a kick out of that. Ezra Miller really just kind of stole the movie. And finally, we do have t-shirts available for Tower Junkies. We just got a new logo designed, and I love it so much. If you go to tpublic.com, just type in Tower Junkies, you'll find us there. Really love the logo. Really am excited to get my shirt in the mail, and I'm going to be ordering one for Tiny for Christmas, so don't tell him I told you guys. Anyway, check that out. And then also we are running that promotion. So if you want a free t-shirt with the new design, with the newly designed logo on it, all you need to do is just write a review on iTunes, screenshot it, send it to matt@obsessiveviewer.com. You'll be entered into the drawing on January 1st. I will select a winner from the entries. And they will get a free t-shirt for Tower Junkies. So go ahead and do that. You have a little bit of time left. Make sure you get that in. So let's get into my review of Christine. Christine is a book that it's been one of my Stephen King blind spots. I've wanted to read it for a long time. I remember seeing at least parts of the movie. I think it was one of those things where when I was a kid, Christine was readily available on like HBO or one of the premium channels that we had. It might have been maybe even like Sci-Fi Channel or whatever, but I'd seen bits and pieces of it. I have very vivid memories of some moments in the movie, but I remember being particularly not necessarily frightened, but kind of just on edge after seeing the movie, because like the night that I watched the movie, or at least the majority of the movie, I went with my mom she had to go get something from work or something, and I went with both my parents, I think, and I stayed in the car when my mom ran in to get something. And like, I just remembered feeling like very uneasy because I was just in a car at night, and just after seeing Christine, and it made me very nervous. But so that's basically my relation to Christine. The movie, the novel itself, this is the first time I've read it, and yeah, I was very excited to read it. And before I get into my review, of course, my review is going to be both a non-spoiler and spoiler, so I'll let you guys know when I go into spoilers. But let me kick it off with a reading of the plot description, courtesy of the back of the paperback edition of Christine. It's love at first sight for high school student Arnie Cunningham when he and his best friend Dennis Gilder spot the dilapidated 1958 red and white Plymouth Fury for sale, dubbed Christine by its original cantankerous owner, rusting away on a front lawn of their suburban Pennsylvania neighborhood. Dennis knows that Arnie's never had much luck in the popularity department or really taken an interest in owning a car. But Christine quickly changes all that. Arnie suddenly has the newfound confidence to stick up for himself, going as far as dating the most beautiful girl at Libertyville High, transfer student Lee Cabot. Even as a mysteriously restored Christine systematically and terrifyingly consumes every aspect of Arnie's life. Dennis and Lee soon realize that they must uncover the awful truth behind a car with a horrifying and murderous history. Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned, and heaven help anyone who gets in Christine's way. All right, so to go into my kind of general thoughts on Christine, the book, first and foremost, I was very intrigued by the structure of the book. It's divided into 3 different parts. There's part 1, Dennis Teenage Car Songs. Part 2 is Arnie Teenage Love Songs, and part 3 is Christine Teenage Death Songs. So part 1 and part 3, those are first person perspective from Dennis's perspective. Part 2 is a third person, it shifts to the third person perspective and kind of goes into Arnie's devolution to his becoming more succumbing to Christine and the power of Christine. I thought this was a very interesting narrative structure to put into the book. It kind of surprised me in a good way when I got to part 2 of the book. So in overall terms, the story was actually very, very good. I wasn't disappointed in it. The way King writes Arnie's transformation throughout the book is very, it's kind of a gradual depiction, but it's never so much that that Arnie becomes the villain of it. I kind of thought it would be more of a straightforward, like, okay, this kid is possessed by this car, and he's going to become this evildoer kind of thing. It's not at all like that. It's more about the Dennis's fight to save his friend's soul, essentially, and the way that the plot kind of unravels that way is really engaging. It held my interest very well throughout the entire novel. And it was, King has a way of setting up a scenario, setting the basic premise and then taking the reader and the characters into into kind of a final climactic moment that really kind of has the apex of tension in the story. So in this case, I was so curious how the hell they were going to get through all of it, how characters were going to come out of this situation unscathed, and it really held my interest and was very a tense read for me. And there are some very, very fascinating images that are throughout there's some great imagery in the book. So some of it's no secret that Christine is a demonic possessed car. And, so the fact that King can write a book about a car that drives itself and murders people and make it not completely ridiculous and crazy is a testament to his ability as a writer. And I thought that the depiction of the sequences where Christine is on her murderous rampage at certain points in the book were really fascinating and very very gory. Like, it was chilling to read about a car, like, because if you think about it, if you're out in the winter and you see a car that has no driver and it goes after you, like, that's a terrifying thought. Like, that's terrifying. And the depiction of it in the book is great. Like, you could tell that King kind of seems like he had a lot of fun writing those portions of the story, because they should be over the top, but he has this charm to his writing that makes it not over the top, but more accessible and frightening. And the various ways that the horror elements are pushed through, like the varying degrees of Christine's actions, makes it so that each interaction she has, each time that she drives away on her own and does her own thing, each time is so different from the last, and it really makes you wonder, like, how it's going to play out. And there are some very interesting ways that King writes about vehicular death, which also, I have to say, it was somewhat haunting to read this book now and read about a car that's, like a car that at some points attacks people. In the description of the victims, like the pain and the injuries, it was kind of haunting to read it now, knowing that in 1999 Stephen King was himself hit by a car. So that was kind of an interesting layer of tension, or not necessarily tension, but it made for kind of a chilling read, or kind of a disturbing read. So the story is about Dennis and Arnie's friendship, and Dennis and Lee's friendship, and Lee and Arnie's relationship, essentially. So there's this kind of triangle there, and then you have Christine kind of in the center of all things. That is, Christine is taking over Arnie, and it is changing his personality and everything. But all of that is, like, it's an engaging story, and it's very well told and everything. But I really liked how, like, my read on it, at least, was that the depiction of not only Arnie's first love, essentially. Arnie is a character who has always been kind of unlucky and has been kind of a little bit of a pariah, not only at school but in his home life, and he's the victim of controlling behavior of everyone in his life, even to a certain extent. Dennis is kind of a controlling figure, or maybe not necessarily controlling, but he and the people that love Arnie most, he and Arnie's parents, for instance, they are protective of Arnie in a way that makes them smothering and controlling, even if they don't intend to be. Like, I don't think Dennis wants to control his friend. He doesn't want to have control over his friend, but he wants his friend to be his friend, his idea of his friend. I'll talk more about that in spoilers, but it's an interesting dynamic to have a character who is going through a transformation while everyone in his life is they're uncomfortable with the transformation because it is like an evil transformation, obviously. But also, on the other hand, there's this kind of subtext of it that they don't want to lose their control over him. Even Dennis, he doesn't want to lose the status quo of the friendship that he has with Arnie. But again, I'll talk about that in spoilers. And the relationship between Arnie and Christine herself is an interesting one, because everyone remembers their first car, and like people, there's this common kind of thing where you kind of fall in love with your first car. This is the first thing that you own that's yours. It's what gets you around. Like my first car was like an 83 Oldsmobile, I think. And like, it was a piece of crap. But it was awesome because I was in high school and I got to drive my friends around and stuff. It was fun. And then even to another extent, when I turned 21, I bought my first new car that I actually still have to this day. I actually need to get rid of it. It's been 10 years. It's kind of not in great shape now, but I love that car. Like, that's the first thing that I've owned. I worked so hard to buy that car. And so there's this energy that exists, this kind of pride that exists when you purchase a vehicle for the first time. And that is a feeling that I feel that King really depicts very well in Christine, because Arnie he's not like a hotshot kid. He's just this kid who is bullied and people control him and everything. And then he has this thing that he's drawn to, that is, granted, it's kind of tearing away at his soul and everything, but he has this connection with this piece of machinery that, you know, everyone wants an escape, and that's his escape, is to work on the car and everything. And I think that it also speaks to a little bit about, it speaks a little bit to the idea of addiction also. I don't know if this was intentional, or I don't know where this was in King's own substance abuse problems and everything, but there is a case to be made about the characters in Arnie's life viewing his obsession with Christine as an addiction, as a type of addiction. There are passages in the book that read exactly like a character talking about another character or talking about Arnie as if Arnie is a substance abusing drug addict, rather than just someone who is obsessed with his car and willing to, and is changing his personality. It's very much feels like an allegory to drug addiction and substance abuse. And it's something that reads really, really earnestly in the book. But let me go into a more kind of, detailed spoiler discussion. I'll stop talking about it in vague terms and go into spoilers. So if you haven't read Christine and you don't want to be spoiled, go ahead and turn off this podcast, go read it or listen to it on Audible, and then come back and listen to it. I'll play a little bit of music here to transition into spoilers. Yeah. Okay, and so we're spoilers on for Christine, and let's see. So there are certain points in the book that I kind of want to touch on here, and I kind of felt like, as I said, the tragedy of Arnie as a character is that he's kind of controlled by everyone. At least early on in the book, it felt like he was very the subject of being controlled. He was susceptible to being controlled. Like, his mother is very controlling. Both of his parents are very controlling and everything. But it also seems like Dennis, very early on, and granted, this could also be a little bit of a narrator bias, but it seems like Dennis in his writing seemed very protective of Arnie. It was sweet, and like, it's a sweet sentiment. Like, he's this kid that he's got it a lot more together than his friend Arnie. Arnie has, his own demons and everything, and he doesn't fit in that well. Which to an extent felt like Dennis used his friendship with Arnie as kind of a not pity. It wasn't a thing of pity, but it kind of felt like maybe Dennis felt better about himself around Arnie. But in that protectiveness over Arnie was sweet, but it seemed a little excessive. And like, that's fine because it's described that Dennis has been friends with Arnie for most of their lives, and so that's natural. But it kind of seems like Dennis was a little bit controlling of Arnie. And so this whole first part of the book, I'm going to go kind of part by part. This first part where after Roland DeBay dies, I like that George, the scene with George and Dennis isn't like a hacky, like George explaining to Dennis like, oh, hey, yeah, the car is evil, watch your friend and everything. He's not like saying that outright. He doesn't say that the car is possessed and can move on its own or anything. He basically just goes through Roland's history with the car, and then Dennis kind of is left to infer his own conclusions from it to an extent. And I also liked in this first section how the changes, like Arnie's changes, are being chronicled through the eyes of Dennis. I like that because it felt like it was good for the kind of mystery of what Christine is doing to Arnie. So he's just seeing, like, we don't get passages of Arnie alone with Christine and everything because we're coming from Dennis's perspective. So it's like we're locked out of Arnie's mind while Christine is taking hold of it. So I really liked that that way, or like I really liked that style of writing in the first part, because it's the main kind of one of the biggest conflicts is Arnie succumbing to Christine, and we are only seeing it as a third party observer from Dennis's perspective. And then I kind of want to jump around a little bit here and talk about Will Darnell for a moment. So Will Darnell owned the garage that Arnie worked on Christine in, and it kind of felt like throughout the entire book, all three parts of it, or really the first two parts, I should say, it felt like Will Darnell was being kind of groomed to being like to have a bigger role in the story. Like, Will Darnell finds out about Christine's ability to drive around on her own, and he figures out, he's like the one person, the one adult really, to figure out what the deal is with Christine, and he's close enough to Arnie that he's picking up on it being like a supernatural thing. And it goes to the point where he witnesses Christine doing her thing. And so it kind of just felt like when he died in the story, kind of toward the end of part 2, I didn't know how I felt about it, because it felt like King wanted to make Darnell a bigger antagonist. And I was under the assumption that he was going to have Darnell kind of go toward like manipulating Arnie or using Christine for some nefarious purposes. It kind of felt like that's what King was wanting to do, but then changed his mind in the middle of writing. Either that, or it felt like he just couldn't figure out how the hell Darnell could use his knowledge of Christine to his advantage. So he just dumped. So it seems like King kind of dumped that thing. I haven't read anything to that. I haven't read anything about the writing or anything on this book, so I don't, like, this is pure conjecture on my part, and there might be trivia somewhere out there to clear that up. But I just felt like Will Darnell was a weird, not weird, but kind of a letdown in terms of depicting the characterization and putting more importance into a character and then just dropping them later. And then also kind of while I'm talking about the same thing, the same kind of negative aspects of it, there's an entire chapter early on in the book, or in part 1 of the book. I think it's actually toward the end of part 1. The chapter is literally titled Football Woes. And the entire chapter is Dennis talking about his football career in high school. And that's okay. Like, it's fine. And as much as I love King's writing, and I love the way that he kind of has this natural ability to just describe natural people in, like, normal people. As much as I love that, I can't help but think that this entire chapter about football and Dennis's problems with football in the season and everything, like the thing he talks about how the team is losing, and like the coach hasn't had a losing season and like his entire career, like it goes on and on and on. That felt like that was just not needed at all. Like, it is, like, I guess to play devil's advocate, it does adequately set up that he plays football, and so that sets up his football injury for later in the book. But it's an entire chapter about a high school kid playing football in a book about a demonic car. It just felt like that could have been edited out completely. And it's not until the end of the chapter that, like, the chapter itself ends with Dennis having a dream or thinking about Christine. And it seems like that passage, the passage about Christine in that chapter, feels so out of place. And it feels like that chapter alone just feels like it belongs in a completely different book. And it feels like the dream that he has about Christine is a complete afterthought. Like, it honestly felt like King was writing a book or writing the chapter and got wrapped up into Dennis's football career, and then suddenly remembered, oh yeah, I'm writing a book about a demonic car. I better throw in Christine here at the end. It felt so out of place, and it kind of bugged me. And I read this book like a chapter or two each night before I went to bed, and like I was so ready for this chapter to end so I could go to bed. And I'm one of those people that if I'm reading something, I can't like stop in the middle of a page and then resume it later. I want to end at a chapter. And it just kept going on and on and on about the damn football team. So, yeah, and it does serve as setup for his football injury, and that's fine, but we didn't need a whole chapter on football. So then we get introduced to Lee later in the part one, and Dennis describes his attraction to her and how, I really liked the depiction of his attraction toward Lee, and also of the jealousy he has toward Lee and Arnie getting together. And this kind of reinforces that whole controlling kind of persona. Like, I don't think in the book, and this is something that's to King's credit, I don't think in the book that Dennis would knowingly admit to this or anything, but I feel like this moment where he is jealous of Arnie and Lee, first of all, it's a very teenage thing to do. Yes, she is the most beautiful girl in school. His best friend is now dating her, and he's naturally jealous of that. But I feel like he was so protective of Arnie, but he views Arnie the same as everyone else does, even if he doesn't admit it, which I thought was very interesting. Like, he's Arnie's like biggest cheerleader. Like, he's Arnie's best friend, but he, just like the entire student body of the high school, thinks, oh, Arnie shouldn't be dating Lee. That doesn't make sense. And he has that, and I think that's where it's steeped in jealousy for him. And so, yeah, so then part two of the book switches the perspective to third-person perspective, and we get more, basically Dennis is out of the picture throughout most, if not all, of this entire part, which I thought was interesting. It was interesting. Coming off the heels of reading The Dead Zone, which had kind of a similar, not necessarily similar structure. You can read, or you can listen to my review with Tiny of the Dead Zone book, but it had a very strange structure where each part had different, like, very distinct parts. It wasn't like there's a whole new cast of characters in each part in the Dead Zone. But with with Christine, it's just each part has a different narrative structure, from the one previous to that. So it was kind of, I don't know, it was kind of jarring to lose Dennis for such a long stretch of time in the book, but I really felt like the tension was upped quite a bit throughout the second part, because at this point, like, we've had an entire third of the book kind of go through the suspicion of Arnie transforming, and the suspicion of Christine, there being something wrong with Christine and something threatening with her. And then the second part is basically Arnie succumbing to Christine and experiencing the strangeness and the supernatural elements of Christine and being drawn toward it, and himself becoming a victim of it in a sense. In this sequence, this whole section of the book opens with a huge fight between Arnie and his parents, and his mom is depicted again as a controlling woman and also kind of an alcoholic. And in that moment, it kind of made me think that, like, Arnie was going to just go batshit crazy over the course of the book, but fortunately, it didn't quite go that way. I like the way that it was depicted, or the way that it was written throughout the book. Although the kind of crossing state lines, the criminal enterprise thing that he had with Darnell was kind of a throwaway plot. Like, I felt like that didn't really lead anywhere too satisfying. But one of the things that I really found fascinating with Arnie's kind of transformation and obsession with Christine is that he transforms into LeBay. It's not so much that I thought early on in the book that maybe the car was possessed by some kind of demon that would that personally, like, creates in its owner its perfect mate. I kind of equated it to, like, someone who dates someone after a breakup and then tries to see the qualities of their ex in the new person they're dating, if that makes sense. To the point where maybe, like, Christine isn't over LeBay, so she's got this new guy, Arnie, and so she's going to not live vicariously through him, but transform him into LeBay to fit her own, romantic thoughts of her first owner. Which, talking about that I'm talking about a car's feelings. That is just kind of ridiculous, but it works pretty well in the book. And while that's not technically what happens in the book, I could easily see that being, while reading it, I could easily see that being a possibility for the plot. And so Christine starts her kind of rampage, her killing of people right around the halfway point of the book. And at that point, I kind of really found myself really liking the way the book was paced, because it doesn't draw out too much stuff, but it saves the more harder to buy into aspects of the story. It saves it until you're really sucked into it. Like, this is a car that's coming to life and killing people. You would think that's going to stretch a lot of you're going to have to suspend some disbelief for that. But the way the book is paced, like, that doesn't happen until about halfway through the book, when you're already drawn into the story and the setting and the characters, and so you can buy into it in an organic way. And like I said, the story works really well as a story of addiction. There's a scene shortly after Christine kills her first victim, but there's a scene where Lee kind of lays everything out to Arnie after she almost chokes in the car. And that scene is particularly powerful because it feels like that entire scene. I didn't put the page number down, but the actual passage reads a lot like an intervention for an addict. And Arnie just won't hear her and won't even come close to admitting the truth and admitting that she's right. And I thought that was a very, very powerful moment in the book because it felt like an allegory to addiction and interventions for addictions. And so as Christine becomes more possessive of Arnie, and as Arnie becomes more transformed into LeBay and Christine, there's moments where a couple scenes, I believe, where Arnie is driving and it's like he's being transported into the 50s in a sense. Like the car turns everything around him, like everything outside the windows of the car turns into a 50s style vision, and the car radio only tunes to music from the 50s, the oldie station. And then there's a scene where he hears like music. It's not necessarily the oldies station, but he actually hears music from the 50s with newscasts from the 50s and everything. And it felt like, I was wondering at that point if Christine was trying to turn him into LeBay in order to relive her heyday. That was my interpretation of it at that point, but it was more LeBay trying to like actually taking him over. But it was just a fascinating way to depict a car basically overtaking a person's personality and everything. And so there are a couple more deaths, and they're very gruesome. Like Don Vandenberg's death, I think that may be my actual like favorite Christine death. The way that it's set up is that the entire town is closed down for due to a blizzard, so all the roads are closed, and then he's attacked by Christine, and the snow kind of conceals the fact that it was Christine. And I love the way that was done. I thought that was very, very ominous and creepy. And then, as I said before, we get Will Darnell's death, which is pretty good. I was riding the high of Don Vandenberg's death, so Will Darnell's was shocking. I didn't really see it coming, but it didn't have the impact that Don Vandenberg's did. But again, I just felt like Darnell was being set up for a bigger antagonist, but it didn't really work out for him. So the way that he's kind of, I would almost say unceremoniously dumped at the end of the end of part 2 of the story, kind of felt a little bit lackluster to me. Even though it ended a big part of the book and it was a big moment in the book, I still wasn't really feeling it. So part 3 kind of brings back Dennis, and he develops a romance between himself and Lee. I really loved this character development, because they both know that they're going to hurt Arnie, but they've both been kind of hurt by Arnie, and they're two people who love this guy and are watching him transform into something that he is not. And the kind of romantic connection that forms between them feels very genuine and nice. Like the whole time that they're talking early on in part 3, the tension feels so again genuine that it's to the point where you kind of almost cheer when Dennis finally kisses her, and that is kind of interesting because that's kind of a crappy thing to do to your best friend, is to form a relationship with his girlfriend, ex-girlfriend that he's on the outs with, but you still cheer for him. And I was very taken with that that development between the characters. And then that chapter where they kiss for the first time ends on a very ominous and chilling passage. It says, I don't think it occurred to either of us that until then we had done nothing unforgivable to Arnie, nothing that might anger Christine. But now, of course, we had. So that, I thought, was a great way to open part 3 and to really bring us into this final act of this story. And it sets it up for a very thrilling finale, very thrilling ending to the story, because it's very, it's true. Like they've done something terrible to Arnie, and they are now risking the wrath of Christine. And at that point, I really didn't see any outcome in which Arnie was going to be redeemed or brought back. I knew from that point on that he's a tragic character. He's going to die. And when it gets to the point where Dennis and Lee are figuring out their solution to this situation, I just felt a very clear sense that it wasn't going to end well for a lot of people. I definitely thought that it wasn't going to end. I knew that it wasn't going to end well for Arnie, but I didn't know how Lee and Dennis were going to fare. I knew that obviously Dennis was going to make it out because he's writing the story, but Lee was up for, was kind of up in the air as far as her survival. And I kind of like the way that the book is kind of secretive about Dennis's plan. Because at that point, as I'm reading it, had I not known some details from the movie, I wouldn't know how the hell they could possibly beat Christine. It's a very clear, very hard scenario to put some characters into. There's not an easy solution to this situation, especially when you have basically your friend possessed by this thing. To destroy that thing while also trying to save your friend is that's a very difficult situation to go in. So imagine my kind of amusement when basically the solution is, I'm just going to pound the crap out of Christine with this big, I think it was a garbage truck, and we'll get that, we'll kill it that way. And it's fine. That's the only solution to the problem itself. To actually taking down Christine is, let's make it into a little cube. And I like the way that the plan goes awry, obviously. And I like the actual climactic moment of them taking down Christine is very, very thrilling and well done. I was gripped by it. I really enjoyed it. The big shocker of it, the thing that I was kind of devastated by, honestly, was the reveal that Arnie's dad was in the car and Arnie's dad's dead. Christine had murdered Arnie's dad. That kind of tore me apart, because we get, and I haven't really talked about Arnie's parents, but we get some very good moments throughout the book where Arnie's dad and Dennis are they have this understanding that, yes, Arnie is kind of special, and that Dennis is, Arnie's father tells Dennis to take care of him. And it's so messed up to have that moment where Dennis sees that, Arnie's dad's dead. I loved that. That was probably my favorite part of the entire book, was the reveal that Arnie's dad was killed. And then it's a downer that, they're both, Arnie's mother and Arnie were killed also while this was going on. And that kind of felt like a little bit like cleaning up, because there's no real way that you can really save Arnie at that point. But it made for the kind of end of the book to be kind of a bittersweet and downer ending. That kind of epilogue where Dennis is telling us the story of basically the aftermath of it, how he and Lee were together for a while, but then they grew apart, and now he's a teacher and she's married and all that stuff. It feels authentic. That's the best way I could describe it. It feels like an authentic ending to the story, and I love the kind of classic horror ending where it's suspected that she's still out there. So overall, I enjoyed Christine quite a bit. Even though it had some kind of superfluous things about it, like Will Darnell's entire subplot, or I wouldn't even call it a subplot, just his characterization throughout it, his development wasn't to my liking. That, and then also that one weird chapter about football. Other than those two things, it was a very enjoyable book, and I was very much taken with it. I'm very excited to see what John Carpenter does with it. We're going to be reviewing the 1983 movie here soon on the podcast, but I haven't seen it since I was a kid, and I only remember bits and pieces of it. So I'm excited to watch that again and check it out. And so overall, I really enjoyed it. I don't know where it ranks with my Stephen King list here. But, I mean, it's not like a top 5 King novel or anything for me, but it's pretty up there. Did I actually add it to the? Yeah, I did. Okay, so I put it right underneath The Shining, which The Shining is like number 8 or 9. Wow, I need to reread The Shining and see where that would land again, because I'm not sure about this list. Yeah, The Shining is number 10, so Christine is number 11 on my list. So it's about in the middle of the pack of the books that I've read of King, but yeah, that's always a changing list, so we'll see how that goes. So kind of to wind down a little bit, and to kind of, as I'm winding down this episode, something that I've noticed that we keep forgetting to do in these book review episodes is that we haven't really connected them to the Dark Tower that much, which this is Tower Junkies. It's the Dark Tower podcast. So I couldn't really find that much of a connection between the Dark Tower and Christine, obviously, except for Roland D. LeBay, the name Roland. I think that King just likes the name Roland. And then also kind of, and this could be honestly an entirely different type of episode that we could maybe do in the future, but I kind of found myself wondering, like, how would the quartet fare against Christine? Like, if you were to take the quartet from the Dark Tower and put it into another King story, how would it fare against it? And I could see definitely a story where maybe Eddie is charmed by Christine, and because he's a recovering addict, and the quartet has to kind of rescue him from it. I don't know. I'm not, obviously I'm not King, so I can't write that. But yeah, I would think that Roland could kind of blow it all to hell. But another connection that I kind of noticed a little bit was that Petunia, the truck that Dennis uses to destroy Christine, is described as pink, and that reminded me of Blaine the Mono. So that just reminded me of that, and that's pretty much all the connections I could pick up on. If I missed anything, let me know, because yeah, I'm definitely interested in knowing if I did or not. So I'm going to wind down this episode. Thank you guys so much for listening. Yeah, so let me know what you thought of Christine, the book, and then we are going to be, like I said, reviewing the movie here soon on the podcast. And yeah, and I promise we'll get some more Dark Tower stuff going. At this point in the feed, I believe we just released our episode with Tony, with me and Tony talking about the Gunslinger. So he is. Let's see. He has finally gotten the drawing of the 3, so he's going to be listening to that soon, or reading that soon, and then I'll be listening to it. So we'll have him on sooner rather than later to review the drawing of the 3, and then Fecus, I'm sure, is about to start the Gunslinger at some point, so we'll have him on for our actual Kef episodes where we go part by part through each book in the series. So look forward to that coming soon. And again, leave us a review on iTunes and send us a screenshot, and you'll be entered in to win a free t-shirt for Tower Junkies. It looks pretty cool. The logo looks really cool on the shirt. So definitely do that. The deadline for that is December 31st. And yeah, I think that'll do it for this episode of Tower Junkies. Long days and pleasant nights. Thank you for listening to Tower Junkies, a Dark Tower podcast presented by ObsessiveViewer.com. You can find more of our episodes at TowerJunkiesPod.com, and you can subscribe to the show on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, or anywhere else podcasts are found. If you'd like to donate to the podcast, you can find ways to do that at TowerJunkiesPod.com/donate, or become a patron for Obsessive Viewer at Patreon.com/ObsessiveViewer for recurring donations with different reward tiers. Every donation goes toward paying the fees to keep the podcast running and is greatly appreciated. Any and all feedback on the podcast is encouraged. You can contact us by emailing us at matt@obsessiveviewer.com, or by tweeting us at TowerJunkiesPod, or at ObsessiveViewer and at ObsessiveTiny. You can also like us on Facebook at facebook.com/TowerJunkiesPod. For more podcast content from ObsessiveViewer.com, check out Anthology, my solo side project podcast where I'm reviewing The Twilight Zone as a first-time viewer and exploring other classic and contemporary science fiction anthology television shows. You can find Anthology at anthologypod.com and anywhere podcasts are found. Finally, if you're philosophically curious, check out Tiny's side project podcast, The Secular Perspective, which explores the concepts of faith, religion, and existence from the perspective of secular hosts Chad and Amanda. You can find that at thesecularperspective.com and subscribe to the podcast on the app of your choice. Once again, thank you for listening to Tower Junkies, and we'll see you next time.